Imagine missiles silently flying toward Moscow. No warning, no peace talks, just a silent message that everything is about to change. A single call, a single decision, and millions of lives hang in the balance. What you're about to hear is real, recent, and incredibly dangerous. This is not a drill. This is the edge of global war. Missiles pointed at the Kremlin? That's what multiple sources are now saying. And they say, it didn't start in Moscow. It started in Washington, more specifically with Donald Trump. Recent reports claim Trump directly asked Ukraine's President Zelensky, can you hit Moscow? What about St. Petersburg? Zelensky didn't hesitate. He reportedly said, we can, if you give us the weapons. Trump, shocked that Ukraine hadn't already tried, began exploring exactly what it would take to give them the power to do it. And that's where things took a turn. This isn't a headline meant to scare you. This is about real conversations between world leaders about hitting Russian cities with U.S.-made missiles. Tomahawk cruise missiles, to be specific. These aren't short-range rockets. These are weapons that can fly hundreds of kilometers, strike with precision, and change the outcome of entire wars. As soon as Trump started asking about sending Tomahawks to Ukraine, the message was clear. The rules of the game are changing fast. Germany jumped in right after. Not only did they agree to help fund a new wave of Patriot missile defense systems for Ukraine, but they also began buying mobile missile launchers, systems that can fire the exact same kind of long-range weapons the U.S. was considering. While the official word is that no Tomahawks have been delivered yet, behind closed doors, plans are moving quickly. The West is done waiting. And Vladimir Putin knows. IT.so, why now? What's different? For one, Trump issued a harsh new warning to Moscow. Stop the war within 50 days or face extreme consequences. That includes 100% tariffs on Russian exports like oil and even tougher secondary sanctions targeting the few countries still trading with Russia, especially China and India. It's not just military pressure now. It's economic isolation on steroids. And it's personal. Putin's camp tried to play it cool. Russian state media brushed off Trump's threat, calling it political noise. But inside the Kremlin, sources say there's panic. The Russian economy is already hurting. Sanctions are biting. And if Trump's plan moves forward, Russia could lose its last few lifelines to global markets. Even worse, it might face long-range missile strikes on its own soil for the first time in this war. What would that look like? Imagine a missile strike on a military base outside Moscow, or a logistics hub in St. Petersburg. Not a carpet bombing. Just a few well-placed hits that shake Russia's confidence. That's what's being discussed now. Not total war, but pressure. The kind of pressure that says, end this now, or it only gets worse. Germany's role is key. They're quietly becoming the backbone of NATO's missile strategy in Eastern Europe. They're the ones paying for the new Patriot systems. They're the ones buying Typhoon launchers, systems that can fire Tomahawks and other long-range missiles. These launchers are mobile, flexible, and fast, perfect for a war that's getting more unpredictable by the day. Meanwhile, in the U.S., Pentagon officials are preparing a list of systems Ukraine could receive in the coming weeks. Some are for defense, some are not. At the top of that list, the long-range version of Atacms missiles, and, if approved, the Tomahawk. That would mean Ukraine could target almost any key military site in Western Russia. This would be a major shift. Until now, most U.S. and NATO weapons were meant to defend Ukraine or hit Russian positions inside Ukrainian borders. But if the West crosses a line and allows strikes inside Russia, everything changes. Putin would have to respond. And that's the most dangerous part. The Kremlin has already warned that any attack on Russian soil with U.S. weapons could be seen as a direct act of war by NATO. Some Russian officials are even talking about the nuclear option again, threats that haven't been made this openly in over a year. They're trying to scare the West into backing down. But so far, it isn't working. Trump seems to believe that escalation is the only path to peace, that if Russia feels enough pain, economically, militarily, psychologically, it will be forced to negotiate. That's the logic behind his escalate to de-escalate strategy. It's risky, very risky, but Trump has always been a gamble taker, and this time he's gambling with global stability. At the same time, Ukraine isn't waiting around. They've started using their own drones to strike deeper into Russian territory. Not big hits, but symbolic ones. Drones crashing into oil, depots, explosions in cities far from the front lines. These are warnings, not attacks. But they're working. Russian citizens are no longer feeling safe, even deep inside their own country. The psychological war has begun, and Trump wants to push it further. If Zelensky gets the tools, Ukraine won't just defend itself. It'll fight fire with fire. The question is, how far is the West really willing to go? Inside NATO, opinions are split. Some countries worry that striking inside Russia could backfire, that Putin might lash out with cyber attacks, more energy blackmail, or worse. But others, especially Poland, the Baltics, and now Germany, say it's time to stop playing defense. Ukraine needs to win, not just survive. There's also talk about using new economic weapons. Beyond tariffs and sanctions, there's now pressure to remove Russia from every major global platform: banking, tech, trade, even sports. Total isolation. Turn Russia into North Korea with nukes. It sounds extreme, but after 2 years of war, patience is running out. And here's where it gets personal. Trump doesn't trust the old playbook. He thinks diplomacy has failed. He believes Putin only understands strength. That's why he's pushing hard, militarily and economically, all at once. Whether you agree with him or not, the effect is real. The world is closer to escalation than at any point in this war. What happens next? That depends on Putin. If he pulls back, this could all end with negotiations. But if he digs in and Trump follows through with long-range weapons, we could be entering a very dangerous new phase. One where no city feels safe. Not Moscow, not Kiev, not even Berlin or London. The weapons are ready. The decisions are made. Now it's a race against time and ego. Putin doesn't want to lose. Trump doesn't want to blink. And the world is watching, waiting, and hoping that no one makes the final, irreversible move. The weapons are real. The warnings have been made. Now, the world waits, because if missiles are launched toward Moscow, nothing will ever be the same again. Let's talk about what a real strike on Russian territory might actually look like. It's not Hollywood. There's no countdown, no dramatic music. Just silent movement in the night. A mobile launcher stationed on the edge of Ukraine receives a green light. Moments later, a Tomahawk missile lifts into the sky, flies low, hugs the terrain, and within minutes reaches Russian airspace. Target? A Russian military base. Or maybe a fuel depot near Belgorod. Or a radar system on the outskirts of Kursk. Nothing civilian. Nothing massive. Just enough to send a message. Ukraine can now strike back. And it won't stop. That's what makes this moment so explosive. It's not just about range. It's about psychology. For 2 years, Russia has shelled Ukrainian cities. It's destroyed power plants, targeted civilians, and pushed past every moral line. But Ukraine hasn't done the same. Not because it didn't want to, but because the West wouldn't allow it. Now, that line is fading. Trump's push to arm Ukraine with long-range missiles is turning the war inside out. If even one U.S.-made missile hits inside Russia, the entire logic of the war changes. Suddenly, Russia is vulnerable in ways it hasn't been since World War II. Suddenly, Putin isn't the only one calling the shots or the strikes. So how would Russia respond? That's the terrifying part. No one knows. Putin has always said attacks on Mother Russia, will be met with a fierce response. He's talked about nuclear weapons more times than any modern leader. He's warned the West to stay out or pay the price. But how much of that is real and how much is bluff? Here's what analysts believe. A direct U.S. or NATO missile strike on Russia is still unlikely. But a Ukrainian missile launched from Ukrainian soil, even if it's U.S.-made, gives just enough deniability. Russia could scream, threaten, panic, but it would be hard to claim. NATO itself attacked, and that's the legal loophole some say Trump is ready to use. He doesn't want full-blown war with Russia. No one does, but he does want pressure, leverage, the kind of edge that could finally force Putin to the negotiating table. Because, let's face it, diplomacy hasn't worked. Sanctions didn't stop the tanks. Talks didn't stop the bombs. But pain? Pain might. Pain in the form of economic strangling. Pain in the form of missile strikes that hit Russian supply lines. Pain in the form of isolation so extreme that Russia becomes a ghost on the world stage. That's the new strategy. And it's risky because even if missiles don't start a nuclear war, they could still trigger chaos. Russia could retaliate with massive cyber attacks on U.S. infrastructure, power grids, banks, communications, or launch new offensives in other regions like Georgia or the Baltics. Or, worst of all, use chemical weapons in Ukraine out of desperation. And if that happens, then NATO would have to respond. That's how escalation spirals. Not from one decision, but from a chain of them, step by step, strike by strike, until someone makes the mistake no one can walk back. But here's the truth. Inaction is also a risk. Every day Ukraine holds back is a day Russia digs in deeper. Every civilian killed is another reason to stop waiting. And if this war drags on, for years, the cost won't just be Ukrainian. It'll be global. Food prices, energy markets, refugee crises, all of it tied to this brutal, endless war. So now we stand at the edge. Zelensky wants to push. Trump wants to push harder. Germany's funding it. Poland is cheering it on. And Russia? Russia is watching with growing fear. Because this time, it's not just about territory. It's about survival. Putin knows that if he loses, if his military is shown to be weak, vulnerable, unable to stop a missile from hitting home, his entire grip on power could crack. That's why he's desperate to project strength, to bluff, to threaten. But his opponents are no longer afraid. Ukraine has proven it can resist. The West has proven it can support. And Trump, for all his unpredictability, has proven one thing above all. He's willing to go where others won't. That's why this next phase is so important. It's not just military. It's psychological, political, strategic. It's about sending a signal, not just to Russia, but to every rogue state watching. North Korea, Iran, even China. The message is simple. If you invade, if you kill, if you threaten the world, there will be consequences. Real ones. That's why the stakes are so high. This is bigger than Trump, bigger than Zelensky, bigger even than Putin. It's about the future of how the world responds to aggression, with fear or with force. The question is, which way do we go? Do we risk escalation in the hope of peace? Or hold back and watch the war grind on? Forever? No one knows the answer yet. But one thing is clear. The moment is coming, fast. And when it arrives, it won't look like a headline or a speech. It'll look like smoke rising in the distance, a city silent, a radar station destroyed, and the whole world holding its breath. Because once the first missile hits Russian soil, there's no going back. Now you understand just how close we are to a global shift, one where even a single strike could rewrite decades of strategy, alliances, and peace. So the question is, are we watching the beginning of the end, or just the end of beginning? Make sure you're here for what happens next. Subscribe, tap the bell, and watch our upcoming deep dive into Russia's secret war games, cyber threats, and what happens if China joins the table. This isn't over, it's just heating up.